The scout arrived at dawn, his sandals bloody from running down treacherous mountain paths in the dark. His face told Leonidas everything before a single word escaped his lips. The Phocian's chest heaved as he gasped out the impossible news. Persian soldiers were descending behind Greek lines. The mountain path had fallen. The perfect defensive position was now a perfect trap. Silence fell over the Spartan king and his officers. For 2 full days, their small force had achieved the impossible, holding back the might of the Persian Empire. They had turned the narrow pass of Thermopylae into a killing ground where Persian numbers meant nothing, where elite immortals died as easily as conscripted levies, where Greek discipline and superior tactics had made mockery of Persian military doctrine. But now, as the first rays of the August sun broke over the Kallidromos mountains, everything changed. The Anapia path, the hidden mountain trail that curved around their position, had been revealed to the Persians by a local Greek named Ephialtes. Greed had accomplished what the might of Persia could not. Leonidas stood motionless, his weathered face betraying nothing, as his mind calculated the impossible mathematics of their position. 7,000 Greeks against the Persian multitude had been sustainable only because of the narrow pass that neutralized Xerxes' overwhelming numbers. Now, with enemies before and behind, the equation had changed irrevocably. Around him, panic spread through the allied Greek contingents. Commanders argued, soldiers whispered, fear rippling through their ranks like wind through summer wheat. Everyone knew what Persian flanking meant: certain death for all. Leonidas turned to his Spartan officers, men who had known since childhood that their lives would end on some battlefield. No words were needed between them. They had come here to die. But the other Greeks, they had come to fight, not to be slaughtered in a hopeless last stand. "Send them home," Leonidas finally said, his voice steady as granite. "The allied contingents will withdraw immediately. They can still escape before the Persians complete their descent." The withdrawal began immediately, organized, reluctant, but necessary. The bulk of the Greek force prepared to retreat, while Leonidas would remain with his 300 Spartans, determined to buy time with their lives. And then the impossible happened. The Thespian commander stepped forward, his 700 men behind him in tight formation. "Sparta will not stand alone," he declared. "Thespiae stands with you." Leonidas regarded the man with newfound respect. This was not Spartan duty or training. This was something else, a conscious choice to die for something greater than survival. The Thebans, too, 400 strong, elected to remain, though their motives would later be questioned by history. In total, approximately 1,400 men, now prepared for what they all knew would be their final dawn. This moment, this decision to stand against impossible odds, was the culmination of 2 days of military brilliance that would reshape our understanding of warfare. What happened at the Hot Gates in 480 BCE was a masterclass in how superior tactics, training, and terrain could neutralize overwhelming numerical advantage. For 2 full days, fewer than 7,000 Greeks had held off a Persian force that may have numbered 200,000 or more, though ancient sources like Herodotus claimed Persian numbers reached into the millions. Nothing short of ridiculous, according to modern scholarship. Even conservative estimates place Xerxes' army at 120,000 to 300,000 soldiers, the largest force ever assembled in European history to that point. Yet in the narrow confines of Thermopylae, the Hot Gates named for nearby sulfur springs, Persian numbers became their greatest weakness. The pass measured just 50 feet wide at its narrowest point, barely enough space for a single wagon to pass. Here, Persian cavalry became useless. their superior archery negated by Greek shields and armor, and their numerical advantage rendered meaningless when only a few dozen men could fight abreast. Two kings faced each other across that narrow pass, each representing a vision of humanity's future. Xerxes, the god king of Persia, commanding millions across 3 continents, believed himself divinely appointed to rule all peoples under heaven. His invasion represented the culmination of Persian manifest destiny, the final absorption of the troublesome Greek city-states into the vast, orderly Persian system. Against him stood Leonidas of Sparta, 60 years old, a king who had never expected to rule, commanding a tiny city-state where men were taught from boyhood that a glorious death outweighed a long life. He led not slaves or subjects, but citizens, men who fought not from fear but from belief in their laws and gods. This was the moment the trap snapped shut. The perfect defense had been undone by a single man's greed. To understand how a handful of Greeks crushed the might of Persia and changed the course of history forever, subscribe now. The seeds of Thermopylae were planted on the blood-soaked plains of Marathon in 490 BCE. There, 10,000 Athenians achieved the impossible, defeating 25,000 Persian soldiers in what should have been a foregone conclusion. For the Persian Empire, which stretched from the Indus River to the Aegean Sea, this humiliation was unprecedented and unforgivable. King Darius III did not live to see his revenge fulfilled. That burden and opportunity fell to his son, Xerxes, who ascended to the Persian throne in 486 BCE with a burning obsession inherited from his father, the complete subjugation of Greece. For 4 years, from 484 to 480 BCE, the Persian Empire mobilized resources on a scale unprecedented in human history. The infrastructure projects alone were staggering testimony to Persian power. They built dual pontoon bridges spanning the Hellespont, floating pathways connecting Asia to Europe across a mile of turbulent water. They cut a canal through the entire Athos Peninsula to avoid the storms that had destroyed a previous Persian fleet. They established supply depots across thousands of miles, stockpiling food and equipment to sustain an army so vast it drank rivers dry as it passed. The Persian military machine was a marvel of imperial organization. It drew troops from across their vast empire: Persians, Medes, Sakai, Bactrians, Indians, Arabs, Phoenicians, and dozens of other peoples. Xerxes commanded not just an army but a migration of nations. His navy alone numbered between 600 to 800 warships, crewed by the finest sailors of the ancient world: Phoenicians, Egyptians, and Ionians. While Herodotus claimed the Persian land forces numbered over 2.6 million, a figure modern scholarship considers nothing short of ridiculous. Even conservative estimates by historians place the Persian army between 120,000 and 300,000 soldiers. This was still an enormous force, the largest army ever assembled in European history to that point. But Xerxes' motivation ran deeper than mere revenge for Marathon. This invasion represented the Persian Empire's attempt to complete its manifest destiny: the unification of the civilized world under the rule of the King of Kings. Greece represented the last significant independent power on the empire's western frontier. Its subjugation would fulfill the Persian royal ideology that proclaimed their divine right to rule all peoples. To Xerxes, Greek resistance wasn't merely political opposition but cosmic disorder, a violation of the natural order where the great king's authority extended to the ends of the earth. As his vast host marched westward in the spring of 480 BCE, victory seemed inevitable. What could a handful of quarreling city-states possibly do against the might of Persia? As reports of Persian preparations reached Greece in 481 BCE, the response revealed both the greatest strength and fatal weakness of Hellenic civilization, its fierce independence. The very city-state system that had fostered Greek innovation and military effectiveness now threatened to doom them through disunity. Major Greek powers abstained entirely from resistance. Argos claimed neutrality while harboring pro-Persian sentiment. Thessaly's geographic vulnerability forced early submission. Much of northern Greece yielded without resistance. Most tragically, many Greek cities actively collaborated with the Persians, seeing submission as preferable to annihilation. Yet against this backdrop of disunity, something remarkable happened. In the late 481 BCE, representatives from 31 Greek city-states gathered at Corinth, itself an extraordinary achievement in a world where Greeks were more accustomed to fighting each other than cooperating. The resulting Hellenic League represented perhaps the greatest diplomatic achievement in Greek history, yet it encompassed only a fraction of the Greek world. At this desperate council, with Persian forces already marching, the Greeks conceived a strategy of breathtaking brilliance. Rather than attempting to meet the Persians in open battle where numbers would tell, Greek commanders recognized that Xerxes' greatest strength, his massive army, was also his greatest vulnerability. Such a force required constant supply by sea. Cut the supply lines and the invasion would collapse under its own logistical weight. This led to the coordinated twin defense. A land force at Thermopylae would block Persian overland advance while the Greek fleet engaged the Persian navy at nearby Artemisium. Neither position could survive alone, but together, they offered the possibility of transforming Persian numerical superiority into a crippling disadvantage. Themistocles, the brilliant Athenian strategist, likely conceived this plan, recognizing that Greek naval technology and tactics, particularly the bronze-prowed trireme, were superior to Persian ships when fighting in restricted waters. It was a desperate gamble. The coalition remained fragile, with many city-states ready to submit to Persia at the first sign of defeat. Everything depended on whether a small force could hold the narrow pass of Thermopylae long enough for the naval strategy to work. The battlefield itself was as crucial as any human decision in determining Thermopylae's outcome. The narrow coastal pass, which gave the site its name from nearby hot sulfur springs, hot gates, represented geography as destiny, terrain so perfectly suited to defensive warfare that it seemed designed by the gods themselves for this confrontation. In 480 BCE, Thermopylae differed dramatically from today's geography. Millennia of silting have pushed the coastline nearly 2 miles north, but in Leonidas's time, the Malian Gulf reached almost to the modern highway. The pass between the Kalidromos Mountains and the sea, measured at its narrowest point, perhaps 50 feet wide enough for a single wagon, but no more. The Phocians had previously built a wall across the narrowest section, creating a perfect choke point. Behind this wall, the pass widened slightly, providing space for the Greeks to deploy in their preferred phalanx formation, while maintaining the bottleneck effect. The defensive advantages were obvious. Persian cavalry became useless. Their superior archery was negated by Greek shields and armor. Their numerical superiority meant nothing when only a few dozen men could fight abreast. When Xerxes first glimpsed the Greek position on August 7th, 480 BCE, he reportedly laughed. The sight of fewer than 7,000 Greeks preparing to resist his vast host seemed to confirm his belief in Greek madness. Herodotus preserves several exchanges that reveal the psychological warfare preceding actual combat. When Persian scouts reported that the Spartans were exercising and combing their long hair, Xerxes consulted Demaratus, the exiled Spartan king, in his entourage. The exile's explanation that Spartans prepared their bodies and groomed themselves when about to risk their lives mystified the Persian monarch. More famous is Leonidas's response to Xerxes' demand for surrender. When told to lay down their weapons, the Spartan king's laconic reply entered immortal legend. "Mollen Labe, come and take them." This was not mere bravado, but a statement of philosophical principle. For Spartans, surrender was literally inconceivable, a violation of the warrior code that defined their existence. Xerxes opened the battle with his most expendable troops, Median and Sicyan levies. He considered sufficient to overwhelm the small Greek force. The result was catastrophic for Persia. In the narrow pass, Persian numerical superiority became irrelevant. Their shorter swords, lighter armor, and smaller shields proved disastrously inadequate against the Greek phalanx. The phalanx itself was a marvel of collective violence. Spartans stood shoulder to shoulder, their bronze shields overlapping to create an impenetrable wall of metal. Their long spears, called sarissai, projected 8 feet beyond their shields, creating a lethal hedge that Persian attackers could neither penetrate nor outflank. When spears broke, they drew their short swords and continued the mechanical slaughter. Persian casualties on the first day were severe enough to visibly shock Xerxes, who allegedly leaped from his golden throne 3 times during the battle. Modern military historians estimate that in an 8-hour engagement, Persian losses could have exceeded several thousand men, while Greek casualties remained minimal. Xerxes' response to the morning disaster was to unleash his elite guard, the 10,000 immortals under Hydarnes. These were the Persian Empire's finest soldiers, called immortals, because their unit was always maintained at exactly 10,000 men, with replacements immediately filling any vacancies. Against the Greek phalanx, even these elite troops proved mortal indeed. Their primary weapons, bows and light javelins, were useless against Greek bronze armor and large shields. In close combat, their equipment and training were simply inferior to the specialized Greek heavy infantry. The immortals retreated in disorder, having accomplished nothing beyond adding to the growing pile of Persian dead. The second day of battle saw Xerxes attempt every tactical innovation in the Persian military arsenal. Persian commanders tried attacking at different hours, hoping to catch the Greeks fatigued or unprepared. They attempted coordinated assaults combining different ethnic units, believing that varied fighting styles might find weaknesses in the phalanx. They even tried psychological warfare, parading exotic troops, Africans, Indians, and other imperial subjects, to intimidate the Greeks with the empire's diversity. Nothing worked. The Greek defensive system, refined through centuries of internecine warfare, proved remarkably adaptable. Leonidas rotated his contingents throughout the day, ensuring fresh troops always manned the critical front positions while exhausted fighters recovered behind the lines. This tactical flexibility gave the Greeks effective numerical parity at the point of contact, despite their overall inferiority. By the evening of August 8th, Xerxes faced a crisis that threatened the entire invasion. His army was suffering thousands of casualties daily while achieving nothing. Worse, reports from Artemisium indicated that the Persian navy was also struggling against the Greek fleet in the narrow straits. The carefully coordinated land-sea operation was becoming a double disaster. Persian morale began to crack. Soldiers, conscripted from across the empire, had no personal investment in conquering Greece. They fought because imperial law demanded it, not from conviction. As casualties mounted and no progress became evident, desertion became a growing concern for Persian commanders. For 2 days, Leonidas and his men had done the impossible. They had held the pass. They had humiliated a god king. But as the sun set on the second day, a shadow was moving in the mountains behind them. The real test was about to begin, to see how a single night march would unravel everything. Make sure you're subscribed to Dark History class. As the second day of fighting ended in Persian failure, Xerxes faced the humiliating prospect of retreat. His massive army, the largest ever assembled in European history, was being held at bay by a force barely 1/100th its size. It was at this moment of deepest crisis that betrayal handed him victory. Ephialtes of Malice, a local Greek whose name would become synonymous with betrayal, approached the Persian camp on the night of August 8th. His motivations remain disputed among historians. Herodotus suggests simple greed, desire for the substantial reward Xerxes had posted for information about Greek weaknesses. What is certain is that Ephialtes possessed crucial knowledge: the location and condition of the Anapia Path, the mountain trail that could outflank the Greek position. The Anapia Path was not unknown to the Greeks. Leonidas had stationed the Phocians there precisely because he knew of its existence. However, the Greek command apparently underestimated both its accessibility and the Phocian contingent's reliability. This would prove a fatal miscalculation. Xerxes immediately grasped the path's significance. He assigned the mission to Hydarnes and his immortals, the same elite troops who had failed so catastrophically in frontal assault. In the darkness of night, however, their superior equipment and training would prove decisive against the surprised Phocian defenders. The Persian force began its ascent around midnight on August 8th, 9. The march required approximately 6 hours through difficult mountain terrain, bringing them to the Phocian position just before dawn. The timing was crucial. They needed enough daylight to complete their descent behind Greek lines, but not so much that the main Greek force could react and redeploy. The 1,000 Phocian warriors assigned to guard the mountain path failed catastrophically. When Hydarnes' immortals attacked their position at dawn, the Phocians retreated to higher ground rather than fighting to the death. This decision, while tactically understandable, doomed the entire Greek defense by allowing the Persian flanking force to continue its descent unopposed. When scouts confirmed that Persian forces were behind Greek lines, Leonidas faced a decision that would echo through history. Military logic demanded immediate retreat, saving the bulk of the Greek force to fight another day. Political necessity suggested the same. These troops represented the core of Greek military power and could not be sacrificed wastefully. Yet Leonidas chose differently. Whether motivated by Spartan law, the oracle's prophecy, or strategic calculation, he dismissed the majority of his allies while retaining approximately 1,400 men. His 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, and 400 Thebans. Historian Charles Hignett famously called Leonidas' decision an unsolved riddle, and modern scholarship remains divided. Was it religious obligation? The Oracle of Delphi had prophesied that either Sparta would fall or its king would die. Was it military necessity? Someone needed to hold the pass long enough for the retreating Greeks to escape. Was it political calculation? A heroic last stand would inspire greater Greek resistance than ignominious retreat. Or was it personal honor? Spartan law allegedly forbade retreat, making surrender unthinkable for the king. The final phase of fighting began when Xerxes launched a coordinated assault from front and rear. Unlike the previous day's methodical combat, this was desperate, brutal close-quarters fighting where survival measured in minutes rather than hours. The Greeks abandoned their defensive wall, advancing into the widest part of the pass, where they could deploy more effectively against attackers from multiple directions. This tactical shift transformed the battle's character. Instead of methodical phalanx warfare, it became a swirling melee where individual prowess and weapon quality were decisive. The Spartan king fell relatively early in the morning's fighting, reportedly struck down by Persian arrows. Herodotus describes a fierce struggle over his body, with Greeks and Persians alternately capturing and recapturing the corpse 4 times. This detail, while possibly literary embellishment, reflects the battle's intensity and the symbolic importance both sides attached to Leonidas's remains. As Persian numbers told, and Greek weapons broke, the survivors retreated to Kolonos Hill, a small rise in the pass where they could make their final stand. With spears shattered and swords broken, they fought with fists and teeth, according to Herodotus, literally selling their lives as dearly as possible. The end came when Persian archers, maintaining safe distance, shot the remaining defenders to death. Archaeological evidence confirms this account. 19th century excavations found numerous Persian arrowheads concentrated on the hill where the Greeks made their last stand. Xerxes' treatment of Leonidas's corpse revealed both his fury and his fear. In violation of Persian custom, which typically honored fallen enemy leaders, he ordered the Spartan king's head severed and impaled on a spike. This unprecedented act of desecration demonstrated how deeply the 3-day resistance had shaken the great king's composure. As the August sun sank low on the 3rd day, an eerie silence fell over Thermopylae, where battle cries and the clash of metal had dominated for 3 days. Now only the wind and the distant surf could be heard. The bodies of 1,400 Greeks lay scattered across the bloodied earth, their final defensive position on Kolonos Hill marked by a carpet of Persian arrows. Xerxes, the god-king of Persia, stood among the fallen, his face a mixture of triumph and barely concealed rage. What should have been a simple matter, brushing aside a token Greek force, had cost him thousands of his finest troops and 3 irreplaceable days. His revenge on the defiant Spartan king was savage and uncharacteristic. Leonidas's head was severed and impaled on a spike, a violation of Persian custom that typically honored fallen enemy leaders. The Persian army marched onward through the now open pass, stepping over the bodies of men who had defied the mightiest empire on earth. Within days, they reached Athens. The city stood empty, its population evacuated to nearby islands, its treasures and religious artifacts safely removed. Xerxes ordered the abandoned city put to the torch, watching as flames consumed the temples on the Acropolis. It should have been his moment of triumph, the culmination of years of planning, and the fulfillment of his father's unfulfilled vengeance. Yet something was wrong. This victory felt hollow, uncertain. While Persian troops occupied the smoking ruins of Athens, the intact Greek fleet had withdrawn in good order to Salamis. The 3 days bought at Thermopylae had allowed the complete evacuation of the Athenian population and the concentration of the entire Greek naval force. The coordinated Greek strategy remained operational despite the loss at the Hot Gates. For Xerxes, standing amid the ashes of Athens, an uncomfortable truth began to emerge. He had won the battle, but might yet lose the war. His army, while still enormous, had been bloodied. His elite forces had been humiliated. And perhaps most dangerously, he had given the Greeks something no tactical victory could overcome. A symbol of resistance so powerful, it was already spreading throughout the remaining free Greek cities. The poet Simonides crafted the epitaph that would etch Thermopylae into eternal memory. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. This simple inscription captured what made Thermopylae legendary. The Greeks had not died in vain or through poor leadership. They had fulfilled their highest duty as citizens. Their sacrifice represented the supreme expression of civic virtue in a culture that prized honor above life. Greek leaders, particularly Themistocles, immediately recognized Thermopylae's propaganda value. Here was proof that Persian numbers meant nothing against Greek courage and skill. If 300 Spartans could hold off the entire Persian army for 3 days, what might 30,000 Greeks accomplish in favorable circumstances? This message spread rapidly through Greek communities, countering the defeatism that had led many cities to submit preemptively to Xerxes. The battle became a demonstration that resistance was not only possible, but potentially victorious, provided Greeks could maintain the unity and determination exemplified at Thermopylae. The true significance of Thermopylae becomes apparent only when viewed as the first act of a larger drama that culminated in decisive Greek victories at Salamis and Plataea. The 3 days at the Hot Gates bought time, inspiration, and strategic position that made ultimate triumph possible. Thermopylae's most immediate strategic value lay in providing time for Athens' complete evacuation. Without Leonidas's delay, this evacuation would have been incomplete, leaving Athens vulnerable to capture with its population intact. The complete evacuation ensured that when Xerxes finally reached Athens, he captured only an empty city, symbolically satisfying but strategically worthless. The coordinated withdrawal from Thermopylae and Artemisium allowed Themistocles to concentrate the entire Greek fleet in the narrow straits around Salamis Island. This concentration was crucial because it negated the Persian navy's numerical superiority, just as Thermopylae had negated their army's advantage. Perhaps most importantly, Thermopylae provided the psychological foundation for Salamis. When Themistocles needed to convince wavering Greek commanders to fight in the straits rather than scatter to defend their individual cities, he could point to Spartan sacrifice as proof that united resistance was both noble and effective. The ultimate irony of Thermopylae is that Xerxes' tactical victory created the very symbol that ensured his strategic defeat. By winning at the Hot Gates, he forged a legend that would unify Greece more effectively than any alliance or treaty. The legend itself became a historical force, inspiring resistance to tyranny across cultures and centuries. From a purely military perspective, Thermopylae demonstrated principles that remain relevant in modern warfare. Superior training, equipment, and leadership can offset numerical disadvantages when terrain and tactics neutralize enemy advantages. The Greek phalanx system, proven so effective at Thermopylae, would dominate Mediterranean warfare for centuries. The Greek victory in the Persian Wars preserved the independence that enabled the Golden Age of Athens, the conquests of Alexander, and the cultural achievements that continue to influence world civilization. Without Thermopylae, without the time it bought and the inspiration it provided, that victory would have been impossible. The Battle of Thermopylae was a defeat that saved a world. It's a story of how 7,000 Greeks, in 3 days, crushed not just Persian soldiers, but Persian assumptions about power and victory. But the real story is darker and more complex than the legend. It's a story of betrayal, of impossible choices, and of a sacrifice whose true value was only revealed by the future it made possible. In the end, Leonidas and his men achieved something rarer than military victory. They transcended death to become immortal symbols of sacrifice for principles greater than individual survival. That transformation, from tactical defeat to eternal inspiration, represents their true triumph and history's ultimate judgment on those 3 days that changed the world. For more tales of the dark, forgotten moments that forged our world, subscribe to Dark History Class and turn on notifications. Because history is not just about the victories you remember, but the defeats that made them possible.